Good morning. Again, my name's Andrew. Pastor Colin's not with us this weekend, but we'll get to hear from him a little bit later via video. Is anyone in here feel like they need a break? Anyone in here need of a vacation? Anybody free vacations? Anybody taking that? Yeah, that's right. Does anybody just need a day to not worry about what's in front of you or what's coming next and just simply breathe? Me too. I need that. My wife, Ariel, and I were so blessed this week. We got to take 3 days away. We went up to Seaside, which is it's this picture perfect, like classy, chic beach town up in the Panhandle. If you've ever seen The Truman Show, that's where it was shot. And we're in this beautiful community, and it's just a really interesting place. Because Seaside is one of those places that nobody actually lives there. Like you got people that own like vacation homes there, and you have people that are visiting there, stopping through, and you have people spending some time there on vacation, but like nobody actually lives in Seaside. You walk by all the cars parked by the beach and in the city square, and they're all from out of state or out of town, and all the people that work in the businesses, like they live nearby, but they don't really live in like Seaside, so they're driving in to do work there for the day. And so you get this odd experience where whether you're walking through the town square or you're laying out on the beach or you're sitting down at a restaurant, you can just look around you. You can look at the hundreds of people there and know that in 1 week's time, like maybe one of them will still be there. Like there's constantly this flow of people in and out and in and out because Seaside, it's a vacation town. Like it's a tourism town. That's what it does. And it really illustrates the tough part about vacations, which is that they always end. Like vacations are always temporary. And we can go on them, but eventually that vacation time ends and you have to jump back into normal life. And normal life will go on long enough until it wears you down to that point of exhaustion where, yet again, you're in need of a vacation. Why is that? Why are we stuck in this cycle of work and exhaustion and vacation, and then work and exhaustion and then vacation? Like, why is it? Why are we seemingly trapped in this never-ending cycle? Why is it that we craft these lives where we're overextended? We're cluttered, we're chaotic, and we're left feeling underappreciated and distracted and anxious and restless, just exhausted. Why don't we live with margin? Why don't we live with white space in our lives? At the root of everything we do, all of our lifestyle choices and decisions, is one thing. If you're taking notes, this is a great place to start. It's desire. Desire is at the root of every choice and every decision you and I have ever made or will ever make. And desire, it's this strong and this strange emotion because we can want things, but to desire something, it's so much deeper than just wanting it if you desire it. And there's things that we need things, but desire is so much more intense than need. Desire is this like gut level, I have to have it feeling. It is this intense depths of our soul, desperation and longing and yearning and craving. And it's this desperation in our souls that moves us and motivates us to do and to act. And as we jump into this series, White Space, about how to live with margin, we're going to begin with this core truth. How we desire determines how we live. How we desire determines how we live. Now, maybe you grew up in a church environment or you've been around church people that treat the word desire like it's a dirty word. They could have been explicitly told you, or maybe the messaging was a little bit more subtle. But there's this incredibly common idea that to live in the way of Jesus, to follow him, means that what we desire doesn't matter, and all we need to do is just do what God says to do and don't do what he says not to do. That's it. And if this is the message you've heard from the church, or that you've received from Christians, or maybe as a follower of Jesus, you've internalized even a little bit into your own heart, I'm sorry that that's what you've heard, and that that's what you've received, and that that's what you've been taught. My hope for you this morning is that you get to experience some healing from Jesus and some freedom from that false idea. See, because desire, this gut level, soul deep longing, it is a gift from God that is not meant to be destroyed, but directed. Our desire is not meant to be suppressed or put away or locked away. It is meant to be directed correctly. And when we direct our desire in the way that God intended us to, that's when we can begin to break free from our overfilled, marginless, anxiety-producing, self-destructive habits that leaves us without rest and hope and white space. And so we're going to look at 3 ways how God has designed us to desire. The first is this: we desire life. We desire life. And so this is why we visit new restaurants and we try new cuisine. It's why we look for new favorite shows on Netflix. This is why we shop the deals on Black Friday and Cyber Monday and Prime Day. This is why we get our annual pass to our favorite theme parks and then debate, between the Universal and the Disney people, like which is better, just the rides or the experience. You can have that debate later at lunch. This is why we keep Zillow open and keep those conversations open with our realtor to make sure that, we have the right house and the best house for us, and there's not something better out there. This is why we climb the corporate ladder to get the next pay raise. It's why we watch the early morning, pregame, postgame, and late night commentaries on the game, as well as the actual football game itself. It's why we wake up early and go to the gym. It's why we buy local organic produce. It's why we go on dates, why we build relationships, why we marry, and why we have children. It's all because we desire life. Every single one of us does what we do because we are desperately longing to have, to achieve, to obtain, to enjoy life. And we have this desire because God put it there. We see this in the very beginnings of humanity, in the genesis of what it is to be human. Here in Genesis 2:7, it says, "Then the Lord God formed the man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And the man became a living creature." Unlike any other creature, any other thing, any other being that God created, it was humanity into which God himself personally breathed life. And that life was not static. It's not something just that we received, but it's something active. It's something moving. It is a life that has purpose to it. And we see this later in this story of how God created humanity, that not only did God give man and woman life, but he gave them a garden to work in and to tend and to keep. He gave them authority over animals so that they might rule over them and watch over them. God gave them food to taste and to savor and to eat. God gave them each other to enjoy in community and an intimate, close-knit relationship. God gave them the desire for and the means to enjoy perfect life. But that's not where we are, is it? That's not the situation in which we find ourselves. We might have this desire for perfect life, but I don't know about you, but I have not yet found the means or the ability to obtain it. We see our situation more in the words of the prophet Isaiah that were read just a couple minutes earlier. "Come, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, and he who has no money, come, buy and eat." There is a lack. There's a deficiency in our experience of life because we desire life, but we can't seem to get it. To use Isaiah's words, we're thirsty. We're longing for something to soothe and satisfy our souls. And we're poor. We are without the means, without the ability to get enough of whatever it is that our souls are hungry for. And to make matters a little bit more complicated and a little bit more messy, when I say the words, we desire life, if we looked deep inside each of our own souls, we would find that we're not all looking for life in the same places. We don't all even have the same idea of what this life is. Because at the core of our being, we have these deep-rooted desires for life and this path that we think will bring us there. Some of us think that we'll find life once we have control. Once we have control, that's where life is. And others of us think that once we have inner peace, once we've quieted the storms of our soul, that's where life is. Some of us, if you're like me, you think that once we have wholeness and like true, perfect integrity, that's where life is. Others of us think that we will find life once we feel loved, or that we will find life once we feel valuable, or that we'll find life once we feel significant. Others of us think that we will get to enjoy life once we're capable, once we're competent, once we can actually just do the things that we want to do and know the things that we want to do, then that's life. Others of us think that once we're safe, once we're free from danger and liberated from anxiety, then there is life. And then some of us think that once we're satisfied, once we've done all the things we've wanted to do, experienced all the things we want to experience, then that's life. Underneath every single thing that you and I have done and are doing right now and will do in the future is a depths of our soul deep desire for life. Now that desire is beautiful. It's good. It's true. But how we direct that desire often is anything but beautiful or good or true. The author and thinker G.K. Chesterton provocatively put it this way: every time a man knocks on the door of a brothel, he is searching for God. Come again? Every time a man knocks on the door of a brothel, he is searching for God. Okay, so this is disturbing. This is maybe even a little bit shocking, but the reason it's disturbing is because it exposes me and you. Isn't that what we're doing? We're just knocking on doors. We're knocking on the doors of people that we think will make us feel full and whole and satisfied. We're knocking on the doors of success, thinking that once we've achieved this thing, then I'll be happy. We're knocking on the doors of things, thinking that once I have this home, I have this car, I have this boat, I have this, insert anything that you could buy with your money. Once I have that thing, then I'll be satisfied. Whether in the eyes of our culture the pursuit is high and lofty or low and debased, either way, there is but one desire behind all actions, and it is a desire for life. And this is why we don't live with white space. This is why we fill our lives to the brim. This is why we don't have financial margin. This is why our minds are constantly being distracted and preoccupied. This is why we're making our hearts restless and anxious, because we desire life, but we're looking for it in all the wrong places. This brings us to the second way how God has designed us to desire. We desire more. Now, more is a dangerous word. More is a word that describes our culture's current obsession with materialism. Advertisers, salespeople, marketers, and CEOs promise us happiness in life if we would just spend more, or do more, or travel more, or learn more, or experience more, or buy more. If we would just live a life of more, then the answer to happiness is somewhere in there. And it's really easy for us to get swept into this. Because every purchase made, every flight booked, every show watched, it brings a fleeting pleasure, doesn't it? It brings this temporary high that satisfies our desire for life for just a moment until we crash again and are looking once more for more. This is not the more that God has designed us to desire. You see, God's more for us is not one of quantity, but of quality. God's more for you and me, this deep-seated desire that he has placed within our souls, it is not one that is a more of quantity, but one of quality. Again, hear the prophet Isaiah. Why? Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? See, Isaiah, he's calling out to Israelites living in exile in Babylon. And much like us at this time, they were being tempted to pursue life in false promises, in the promises of having more things, of building up security, of achieving more success as they tried to find and to build home in Babylon in exile. To borrow Isaiah's language again, you and I, we can keep spending our money, we can keep spending our time, and we can keep spending our energy on things that won't feed or satisfy our souls. We can keep doing that, but it will never be enough. We can waste all that we have and work ourselves past the limits of what is healthy so that we are left without any margin, without any white space, without any rest or any hope, and yet we will still be left desiring more. When I say that we desire more, I mean that we are desiring something that is on an entirely different level, an entirely different higher order of being and substance to bring us life. Because when we look at all that there is, if we look at all that has existence in the universe and try to categorize it, it really does break down into just two places, two sources, two options towards which we can direct our desire. The maker, our maker, and what is made. That's it. There's the God who created all things, and then everything else, which is the stuff that he made, and the stuff that we've made because he gave us the creative ability to create out of what he's already created. We see in God's word, we see it in history, and we see it in our hearts if we take the time to look there. That there is no thing, there is no place, there is no person, there is no ideology that is sufficient to satisfy our souls or bring peace to our restless hearts, because the more that we desire is our maker, God himself. And in the next point, the final point, we're going to talk and discover more about what does it mean to direct our desire towards God. But I want to be sure that we don't overcorrect here when we think about what is made, because the reality of this situation is that we're going to leave this building and we have to interact with things, right? Like, you own things. You have to buy things. You are in relationships with people. You have time to spend places. So what are we supposed to do with all that? Knowing that the more that we desire is God himself, how then ought I react and interact with all this stuff, all that is made? And again, I think so many of us have been fed this false story about God. Some of us have walked away from church, or maybe we have doubted Christianity because we were told that God is anti-money. He's anti-pleasure. He's anti-possessions. He's anti-sex. He's anti-success. He's anti-us. We were told that he's spiritual. He's ethereal. And that all that is material is evil. It's wrong. And some of us know that that's not true. We know enough about Scripture, about God's word, to know that, okay, that's not the story of Scripture. That's not God's voice speaking. There is not this divide between what is spiritual and ethereal being good and what is material being bad. That's not the case. But still, in the background of our minds and in the background of our hearts, that idea lurks. And it rears its head often in our marriages and in our parenting and in our friendships and in our own personal thought life. Hear me. Hear me clearly this morning. God is not anti-material. He is not anti-money. He's not anti-pleasure. He is not anti-possessions. He's not anti-sex. He's not anti-success. He is not anti-us. How do I know that? God made all that is for our good and for his glory. See, this is why Paul could write to a church that was much like ours in this city called Corinth. And they lived in a time and in a culture that, much like ours, was really materialistic. And they struggled with it just like us. And this is what Paul wrote to them. So, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all to the glory of God. This is massive. Like, where we are in history, where we are culturally, where we are as a community, this is a massive thing for us. Let me just point out 3 things here. All that is made was made by God to be enjoyed. You see, God is glorified when we receive and enjoy the good gifts that he has given us. God gave you 5 senses, not so that you would hate them, not so that you would devalue them, but so that you would use them and enjoy them by interacting with what he has made. Like think about this. Like, what great gifts we have been given in having these 5 senses. We get to taste. Like that interplay between savory and sweet. In an ooey gooey, fresh out of the oven, like salted caramel chocolate chip cookie with like a little sea salt sprinkled on top. Like, we get to taste that. Rocks, they don't get to taste that. Like the grass, it doesn't get to taste that. Like, it's not a guaranteed thing just by being a created thing of God that you get to taste. But we do. God gave that to us as a gift. We get to smell. We can be at the beach on sunset and smell that salty breeze coming off of the ocean. We get to hear. We can sit around a dinner table with people that we love and hear bubbling, infectious laughter as we tell stories and tell jokes. We get to hear. We get to touch the people that we love most. We get to touch them, to hold them, to hug them, to embrace them. That's a gift. We get to see, especially here in Florida. Like, every evening, we have an opportunity to see the sky literally explode in magnificent colors and movement, in this immense, awesome wonder. We get to see it. Those 5 senses are God's gift to us so that we might enjoy all that he has made for us. All that is made was made to remind us of God. See, when we lean into enjoying what God has given us, we're reminded of God because we become keenly aware that all we have is a gift that we've received from him. Like, it's just natural that when we receive something incredible, our heart bubbles up in thank yous, right? Like, if I'm out at dinner and I get on my plate the glorious wonder of a well-cooked, medium rare steak that is like buttery and sumptuous, and it has like just the right amount of like those spices, like just like salt and pepper on it, and you just cut into it and it is perfect. Like, I want to give my compliments to the chef in that moment. I want to say, thank you. This is incredible. Or like when our family takes Ariel and me and Asher on vacation and we get to spend a week up in the mountains and get away from it all, enjoy the beauty of God's creation. I want to say thank you to our family for giving us that experience. As we enjoy the things that God has given us, both great and small, in times of hardship and in times of comfort, as we lean into enjoying that, our hearts will slowly be retrained to bubble up in thank yous that remind us of God's love for us. All that was made to bring us to worship God. Notice in what Paul wrote to the church in Corinth, he doesn't give a detailed list of what we can do to glorify God. He doesn't give us this list of how we can worship God. He gives us this very broad category. Whatever you do. I think we're missing out on that because we tend to confine worship. And when we confine worship of God to just our time in the morning in the Word or in prayer, or if we confine our idea of worship to God to just our community group during the week, or we confine it to just what we do in our Sunday gatherings or the songs that we sing, we are missing out. Because what is made, it's not an end in itself. And when we treat it that way, which we so often do, we're left wanting more. All that is made was crafted so that we can desire God through those things. That as we enjoy what is made, we are reminded of God and we are brought to worship him for who he is and what he's done for us. All that is made was made so that we can desire God through those things. We desire more. And let's look at the third and final way how God has designed us to desire. We desire better. Let's look again at Isaiah 55. Listen diligently to me and eat what is good, and delight yourselves in rich food. Incline your ear and come to me. Hear that your soul may live. Let's notice the words that the prophet Isaiah uses here as he invites the people of Israel, as he invites us to desire in the right way. Eat what is good. Delight yourselves in rich food. To pursue God, our Maker, as the object of our desire instead of what is made, it's not merely the right or the correct thing to do. Although it is that. It is in accordance with God's law over us and in accordance with God's design in us. It is those things, but it's also more than that. To pursue God, our Maker, is the object of our desire. It is the better. It is the more pleasurable. It is the most satisfying thing to do. Now, we can be honest with each other this morning. If you've walked with Jesus for any portion of time, you know that it does not always feel like this. Living in the way of Jesus, it involves dying to ourselves, giving and loving sacrificially and denying ourselves. And Jesus is clear about this. He said, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will save it. This way of life does not sound experientially better. At first glance, it doesn't seem more pleasurable than living life on my own terms. It does not sound more enjoyable than just trying to figure out how to satisfy my soul deep desires my own way. So how is pursuing God as the object of our desire experientially better? Jesus explains more of what he means by losing our lives for his sake and ending up saving them this way. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. See, sooner or later, eventually, our pursuit of people and things and places and ideologies, it will crush us. See, the very same pursuits that we think will bring us life will end up laying so heavy upon us that they will take away what little life we have left. The only source of life, of rest, of peace, of satisfaction, of hope, of pleasure is God himself. See, Jesus gave up his life. Jesus denied himself. He took up his own cross. And he died on our behalf as people who warped God's good design for life. And as people who rebelled against their maker and said, we know how to do life on our own terms better than you, so back off. That's who Jesus died for. That's who he gave up his life for. And he was buried in a tomb. And he rose to new, eternal, fully satisfying, perfect life so that we might get to start walking in that same life too. Not just in eternity, but starting today, like starting right now in this moment, starting to walk in the way of Jesus and then going on forevermore into the new heavens and the new earth that Jesus will inaugurate when he returns. So what does all this, what does all that I just said have to do with white space? What does this have to do with our busy, stressed out, marginless lives? All of this means that creating white space, it's not just about choosing less. Although that's important. Like, we probably do have some learning to do when it comes to boundaries and saying no. Like, we acknowledge, like, we do need to choose less. Like, that's a part of it. But it's not just about choosing less. It's about choosing better. Creating white space is not just about choosing to do less things in your life and give you margin. It's about choosing the better thing first. It's about choosing to delight in God. Learning to desire God. And for some of us, that sounds weird. It sounds odd. It sounds foreign because we grew up thinking that God is so other. He is so different. He is so removed. He is so holy that we could not possibly relate to, much less delight in him. And that thought isn't altogether wrong. It isn't. The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. The starting point of our relationship with God must be recognizing him as our maker and us as people made by him, recognizing the vast difference between the one who made all things and rules over all things and us as a singular being that was made by him. That's where we have to begin. But the fear of God is not the end of wisdom. It's a beginning that is meant to highlight, to accentuate, to magnify the wonder that the holy, the perfect God who made and rules over all things has drawn close to us so that we might delight in relationship with him. You see, knowing that God is so vast, that he is so powerful, and he is cosmically incredible makes it that much more better. It makes it that much more amazing that God loves us. He knows us. He delights in us. And he invites us to delight in him. See, God is better. And our desire for him as the better thing, it's meant to be experientially satisfying. See, not to do so is just foolish, because it's not enough just to know or to believe as a fact that God is better. See, because knowing that God is better, but choosing not to delight in him, this is what it's like. Next month, Thanksgiving, coming up. Also, that's crazy. How are the holidays coming our way? Imagine you're at Thanksgiving, you've eaten dinner, and the desserts come out. Y'all, you got pumpkin, you got sweet potato, you got pecan, you got apple, you got butterscotch pie. And these aren't just pies. Like, these are flaky crust, fresh out of the oven, made with a grandmother's love, and extra helpings of whipped cream on top. It's like having those pies in front of you. And for dessert, just choosing to nibble on the Big Lots brand Oreo-style cookie in the corner. Who does that? Nobody does that. That is foolish. And yet, that is what you and I do. Every single day, that is what we do. When we direct this deep-seated, beautiful desire of our soul for life on what is made instead of on our maker. And I know it's hard. It is hard to live in the way of Jesus. It is hard to redirect our desire on God. We have a lot of options. We have too many options, honestly. And every single one of those too many options is crying out loudly and constantly with false promises of life. And we don't like waiting. We don't like being silent. And setting our desire on God often means trusting God with what we cannot see and we cannot understand. It means quietly listening for his still small voice to speak into our brokenness. And we forget quickly. And no matter how many times I tell myself, Andrew, God is better, pursue him, delight in him, enjoy him, my memory fades like that so quickly if I am not daily reminding myself that God is better, I don't remember it. And nevertheless, this truth remains: God is better. How we desire determines how we live. Over the next 3 weeks, we're going to dig into 3 areas where our desire often runs astray and where we end up creating these overextended, cluttered, chaotic lives that leave us wondering how we could ever regain margin and have white space again. We're going to look closely at 3 gifts that God has given us, made by him for us to enjoy, and through that enjoyment to remember and worship him. We're going to look at time, resources, and relationships. If you're like me, if you're a human, you struggle to deal with these 3 things. You struggle to use these good gifts rightly. You struggle to manage your desire and how you're supposed to direct it on them or through them to get to desiring in God. And so please don't miss these next 3 weeks. They're going to be practical. They're going to be surgical. They're going to get deep into our mess and deep into our heart. And it's only that way that we'll find life. Let's close with one final question as Laura comes up. In this season of life, consider your life, where you are, what's going on around you, your family, your work, your community, where you are right now. What do you desire? What do you desire really? What is that deep hope and longing? Maybe you're looking to money to quiet your fears of the future. Maybe you're believing that being known and successful will quiet your self-doubt. Maybe you're hoping that someone else will make you feel whole inside. Maybe you're holding on to your accomplishments and status is what gives you meaning. Whatever it is that you are desiring, whatever your answer to that question is, I want you to take these next few moments to bring that thing to God.